Yeah. Subscribe to the channel. Ivan left the clinic, stopped on the steps, and looked around. The weather was the most disgusting. Dark, gloomy clouds hung low over the city, almost touching the black branches of trees. Yesterday, the first snow this year. Today turned into dirty mud. People walked slowly, shivering, looking at themselves. They tried to bypass the puddles and the icy rocks of snow. To slip on such a rock and end up with a foot in cold water, or worse, the prospect is not the best. Everything was gray, dirty, and depressing. But Ivan envied these people, their ability to be unhappy with the weather, their wet feet, and even a bad mood. After all, they have their whole life ahead, unlike him. And he had a sentence in his pocket, medical card with a bunch of analyses, and in this card, at the very end, was written with a. He said, addressing the driver, "You're probably going home today. You'll have a day off. And I want to take a walk a little." "How?" "Ivan Borisovic, you have an hour flight." The driver gave up his hands, a young boy who worked for Ivan a little more than half a year. "It's okay, I'll transfer." He calmed down too much his loyal subordinate. Can this guy with a puffy health understand that Ivan is now completely out of work? But once, a good big but empty house. And now this house meets him every evening with a ringing emptiness. A chic car in which there is no one to drive, but a large family would fit in it. He could not even get a dog because of his constant busyness. Having let Stepan go and called the secretary, which is canceled for today, Ivan merged with the crowd fighting the bad weather of passersby. He walked, I don't know where. He was thinking about the dirty snow under his feet and remembering everything the doctor told him. It turns out that this is the last November sleigh in his life. And summer may not be at all with him, and nothing can be done. And no money will help him anymore. If only he had turned to the doctor half a year earlier. He was worried about headaches, but he endured. After all, he thought that he was just tired. He even planned to go on vacation in the summer, to travel because of this endless fatigue. But everything somehow turned around and curled up. New partners, new tenders. Do not postpone, do not miss. So the summer flew by, and now he was told that it was the last summer in his life. But how is it the last? This cannot be. He is not even yet, and still live and live. But it turned out that he no longer has this life. The dark clouds were finally born with small snow. The cold snowflakes hit Ivan's bare hands, bringing him back to reality. He even stopped, closed his eyes, and put his face on them, listening to their feelings. Now he will listen to everything, trying to enjoy every moment of his running life. "Mom, what is this uncle doing?" Having lowered his head and opened his eyes, Ivan saw a woman with a boy of 5 on his bench a couple of meters away. She was sitting, pressing the child to her, trying to warm him up a little. And she was hit by a strong oznop. It immediately caught the eye. It was clear that they had been there for a long time. They were sitting covered in snow like snowmen. The baby even had snowflakes on her eyelashes. And he would occasionally wave them with his bare hand, reddened by frost. They were dressed completely out of season. It was late autumn, but outside, the temperature did not rise even during the day. Ivan looked at this strange couple and asked, "Are you cold? Why don't you go home? It's cold, and it's snowing too. Will you get cold, baby?" The woman looked at him with her eyes closed and answered, "What's the matter with you? Go your own way." Ivan was about to leave. To some extent, she was right. But suddenly, he saw the boy's eyes. He looked at the man with such desperate hope, with such a prayer for help that it would not work to pass by. He sat next to the bench. "What's your name, baby?" He turned to the child. "Vanya." The boy barely heard. But wow, coincidence. "My name is also Ivan. Do you want to eat, Vanya?" For some reason, he decided that both mom and the child were hungry. "They look like this. I won't say because mom will scold me." The boy answered seriously as an adult. "Maybe mom will tell us herself if you ate today or not." Ivan looked up at the woman, sitting silently. "What do you want from us? What are you clinging to? Go your own way." The woman was not going to have a ceremony with these passersby, most likely from the festive curiosity that came to them with inquiries. She knew this rich contingent. She asks, pokes with her tongue, shakes her head, and leaves in her own way. They had no hearts, only one vision of compassion. Ivan was not going to leave them. So he even replied roughly to the woman, "You should have taken care of your child first, before you bit yourself. You are so proud. Aren't you afraid that he will get sick and die from hunger and coldness overnight?" The woman only pressed her son harder, scared to look at the man. She suddenly thought that this harmful uncle would be able to take away her child, call the police, and she would find out the shelter for Vanechka. She has no work, no housing since yesterday. Even those modest savings that would be enough for a couple of weeks of life in the hostel. Or what food for two, and those in the same hostel remained. It's good that she herself escaped from the drunk Don Juans and ran away with Vanechka on her hands. And the bag with the things where she hid the wallet from Sin, there remained. Okay, Ivan, with the mercy of his hair, seeing that he was very scared of the poor girl, is crying out, pressing his son harder and harder. Let's adequately assess the situation. I understand that you don't have money. She negatively waved her head. Did the child eat something today? She again negatively waved her head. Well, then get up and let's go. The woman raised her frightened eyes at him. Don't worry, I'm not a sexy maniac. You have nothing to take from me. You're even so thin and exhausted, it would not suit the organs. He tried to discharge the situation with a joke. Let's go feed Vanya. Hey, Vanya. He already turned to the quiet boy. Do you want to eat? The child happily closed his head. Well, the question is solved. Get up, come with me. Ivan regretted letting the driver go. The woman was so weak, either from cold or from starvation, that she could barely move. He grabbed the baby in his hands and, trying to keep up the pace so that the satellite could catch up with him, went to the parking lot of the taxi. Half an hour later, his random acquaintances already took off their coats in the huge hallway of his mansion, looking around in fear. The boy couldn't take it anymore and said, "Mom, we're going to spend the night at the station again." Ivan heard this and laughed. Why is it at the station? The woman answered instead of his son. He only saw such big rooms and high ceilings at the station, and smiled. After a full dinner, the housekeeper who had warned about the guests tried her best. They went to the living room. Vanechka warmed up. He was full and cheerful, and at first he tried to explore the premises, constantly pointing his finger at one or another object with an unchanging question. What is it? But he quickly got tired and fell asleep on the couch near his mother, putting her on her knees. And the woman, who turned out to be very young at the time of birth, years old and no more, told a little about herself. My name is Alessia. That's what I was called in the shelter where my breast was good for. A banal story. My mother gave birth to me by chance and refused to be born in my maternity home. My father was not going to recognize me. My nannies told me this when I had grown up a little, but I did not stop waiting for my parents. So they gave me bitter truth to leave my hope. Such scoundrels as me are there. And I, young and stupid, fell in love. Not a simple guy. I wanted a prince on a white horse, so I got him. Only he, knowing about my pregnancy, melted in the fog with his horse. Alexia smiled indignantly, remembering the guy she once loved. But it's okay. I worked hard. I was able to feed myself at home with a sitting belly. I picked up Vanechka. The baby went to the nursery. We'd lived to sing, but his mother, the last fool, wanted female happiness again. She didn't need a prince anymore. She was a little smarter, but she wouldn't refuse a good guy. But where can I get good guys? Now I got even worse love. I lost my room because of her. Because when she was reliable and naive, he cleverly kicked me out of her, sold me behind my back. The fat men came, showed the documents that the housing belonged to them, and gave 3 hours to collect. And what can I do? It's my fault I trusted my beloved, and gave the keys to the room where the documents were lying. But he stole them and sold my room on a fake trust. And then he disappeared, taking the money with him. I had a little savings. I thought I'd live in the hostel. While I find work and housing, I'll decide. But there was a special contingent. Drunk men almost raped me in the evening, breaking into the room. I barely took my legs and left all my things. And there was money in those things. I don't know what to do now. I'm afraid to go there. I understand everything. You stay here with the child, spend the night, and I will think about how to help you tomorrow. Let's go. I'll show you where you will live with the boy. Ivan carried him to the second floor, brought him into the room. It was the biggest and brightest bedroom in his mansion. Having put the child on the bed, he said, "Get in. If you need something, call Petrovna. This is my housekeeper. You have already seen each other. Good night. And don't worry, I'm not a drunk man. I won't stand up. There is a lock on the door. If you are afraid, you can close." With these words, he closed the door behind him and went into his bedroom. And Alessia lay down next to the peacefully drooling Vanechka and fell asleep immediately, exhausted from the last few days with her. In our time, in order to solve any problem, it is not necessary to leave the house. It is enough to have a mobile phone with a paid tariff. While the guests were sleeping, the hospitable host at home learned everything about the guy who sold her room, and even where he could be looked for, and also filed a complaint against the hostel. Even with the former head of police, who is now the big head of the police, he agreed to check if everything was all right there and try to find things about Alice. While he was dealing with all these problems, he felt that for several hours now his headache was not torturing him, and that his body functioned perfectly. It had not been so easy and free for him for a long time. To fall asleep, he didn't even need the pills he had taken for more than half a year, forgetting what a normal sleep was. But the next morning he suddenly felt sick. He lay in bed for a long time, canceling all important work events. Warned of his lack of sleep, Olesya and Vanechka tried to behave quietly. Even in the living room they walked on the chains, so as not to disturb. Having come to his senses a little, Ivan decided to go down to the living room. What he saw there led him astray. Alice was in the kitchen, putting the surprised Petrovna in the chair in front of the TV. Then the magnificent smell of pie with cabbage spread. Ivan would never confuse this smell with any other. She got distracted from the stove when Vanya, sitting quietly on the couch near the housekeeper and carefully watching what was happening on the screen, did not shout "Uncle Vanya," and did not throw himself at him. Alessia turned around, smiled kindly, and said, "Good morning, and we are a little bit of a hostess here, do you mind?" Ivan negatively rapped his head and asked, "How do you know that I love pies with cabbage?" Alessia smiled, dreaming, and Petrovna giggled behind his back. Ivan realized that it was the housekeeper who told the girl how to please the hostess at home. "Please come to the table. Breakfast is ready." After breakfast, Ivan offered the young woman to live with him until all her problems, which he is already engaged in, are solved. And he reminded her that before he refused, let her think about her son. Here is a stubborn girl. He thought when she said that she was uncomfortable, that they would leave, that they were completely strangers to him. Well, how are they strangers if I am Ivan and he is Vanya? "We have so much in common, so we are no longer strangers," said the man, mumbling to the boy. He laughed, clapped his hands. "This uncle will be happy to stay." On the way to work, Ivan thought that fate itself sent him this unfortunate girl with a baby. She could be his daughter, and the man was not going to let them go. In the evening, he was already in a hurry home, knowing that he was waiting there. On the way, he stopped by the store, bought a bunch of toys for the boy, and his mother took a sports suit, guessing which size would fit on the eye. Entering the hallway, he was delighted when he saw how a baby was carrying around to meet him, spreading his arms wide. He threw the packages, grabbed the child, and threw him high, and high several times. Vanechka was not scared. He happily laughed, and then hugged him tightly around the neck and kissed his cheek. Ivan even cried when he saw such a tender little child. Everyone was happy with the gifts. Elisa began to deny that it was uncomfortable, but Ivan pounced on her and made her try it on. The girl's costume came up. The man was already feeling like the head of the family, where the adult daughter and the little grandson meet him at work, rejoice, miss him. He thought, watching them, that it would not interfere with the dog to be brought in. Thanks to the love and care of his suddenly acquired family, Ivan lived for a year and a half, and not 6 months, as the doctors promised. He bought a dog, then a kitten, deciding that there would be a place for everyone in his house. He finally enjoyed the summer, spending a few weeks with Olesya and Vanechka on the shore of the sea. And he left all the property to his aunt, appointing his mother the only caretaker. What else could it be? His most dear ones are never closer,